The whole woke movement is an extension of this culture's narcissism on steroids.
Mm.
To me, woke is a fortification of the head. Awake is a softening of the ego and an opening of the heart.
Hello and welcome to Self-Talk. I'm your host, Rachel Astarte. Today, my guest is Abdi Assadi. He is a spiritual counselor and healer with 4 decades of clinical experience in acupuncture, body-centered psychotherapy, indigenous shamanic practices, and many meditative techniques. He's also a practitioner of internal and external martial arts. The real crux of Abdi's work is integrating the human shadow, which are the disowned parts of ourselves that cause much of our disease and dysfunction. We talk about the shadow on this podcast as well. So if you're not familiar with it or you want a refresher, you can check out episodes 13 through 15. Or I highly recommend picking up Abdi's book, Shadows on the Path, which was actually my introduction to his work many years ago. Abdi, welcome to Self-Talk.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah. So jumping in, we have a lot to talk about, but just by way of introducing what we're going to talk about today, it was about 2 years ago exactly that you posted a podcast on your website called Fork in the Road and We Are the Meal. And when I listened to it back then, I remember that I was, as the kids say, shook by it. And it was a year into the pandemic. People were freaking out. And this podcast was a real help, a real grounding. One of the things that really stuck out for me, our culture at that time was beginning its mitosis into these divisions. And I was really beginning to notice it now, but I'm seeing it even more so, which was kind of what your podcast at that time was talking about. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that really stuck out for me and a launching point for today's discussion was the difference between woke and awake. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at that time, it made sense, but now it's making even more sense. It's really coming into this division of, what does it mean to be woke? What does it mean to be awake? I don't think even people are asking the question, what does it mean to be awake at this point?
Not.
Yeah. So that's where I'd like us to start, if that's okay with you, with your definitions, because they're so important. It's very important to know the difference between the two. So if you would.
So wake and awoke. The whole woke movement is an extension of this culture's narcissism on steroids. Mm. To me, woke is a fortification of the head. Awake is a softening of the ego and an opening of the heart. So when we look at the woke movement, there are obviously very valid points that people carry, right? The racism, the sexism, the phobias that the culture has. What I'm seeing with that, if you look at what's happening with the woke movement, I don't see any healing. I see more separation.
Yes.
So that right there should tell us what's happening. Becoming awake, which is a very, very painful process, is a dying of that narcissism, a softening of the ego, an opening of the heart. So the idea with woke is to bring social justice, to bring oneness. I'm seeing that 180 degrees different. Mm-hmm. So narcissism on steroids again, which is the bane of this culture. We won't even get into how this woke movement started, because if you look at it, there's actually very dark forces behind it that are forcing it. This didn't just pop up and all of a sudden people are like, oh, woke. These things are dark. And if people want to look into, the powers that be that brought this is all about divide and conquer.
Yes.
This is not about unity. Mm-hmm. So one thing I've learned being a healer in this culture, both shamanically and as a body worker, as an acupuncturist, is anything that comes up that gets taken up by culture is actually poison for the heart and steroids for the narcissism. So I've never seen this level of narcissism that I'm seeing now. And the ugly beauty, the dark beauty of the woke movement is this fortification under the guise of social awareness, under the guise of it's for the oneness. What I see in it is judgment. What I see is people getting judged. And, one of the side major effects of it is this cancel culture, which is frightening.
Yeah.
And as a guy who has swam in the dark rivers of shadow his whole life and really investigated it, when you do what we're doing culturally, which is canceling, what we're doing is shoving that shadow down. Mm-hmm. And when you shove the shadow down, it's going to be the Hydra. It's going to come in with 10,000 heads and be way uglier and way gnarly. Mm-hmm. So again, when we look at the woke movement, what's happening? Is there less shootings of cops with people? Is there less poverty? No, it isn't. What it is everything's being shoved down. And when you shove things down, it's already happening. It comes back way more forcefully in way more unconscious ways and is very, very destructive. Mm-hmm. So the awake movement, to be awake, is not a movement. We're forced into it. The woke movement, anything that's easy, you have to understand that's the ego doing it. It's very easy to get on the internet like, F you, blah, 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 blah. That is easy. The awake movement is not something that one does. It's something that the spirit, the divine feminine, whatever word you want to use for it, brings it to your door mm-hmm. and shoves it down your throat. And it's usually it's always through some painful thing. A betrayal, a divorce, accident, injury. And then we're forced into softening the ego. Mm-hmm. I've yet to meet someone, and I've treated over 10,000 people, who just wakes up one day, hey, I'm going to wake up today. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
And this culture has an amazing gift for taking anything that is a threat to this narcissism and the ego and commodifying it, mm-hmm. commercializing it, and then also distributing it like the woke movement.
Yeah.
Now, again, to be very clear, there are actual issues that the woke movement wants to address. I don't see that being addressed. Mm-hmm. I'm just seeing that being used as window dressing so people can vomit their narcissism onto it.
Yeah.
Right. To vomit their narcissism and actually, in an unconscious way, fortifying the problems that are there.
Yeah, I think that's the danger. This is the separation that I'm seeing.
Yes.
Is there's this push to raise up the voices of the marginalized people.
Yes.
And then there's a pulling away, moving in the direction of the other.
Yes.
Right. So, and it brings to mind Sri Ramana Maharshi, there is no other. So that always makes me wonder. And yeah, it's the stay in your lane culture that's developing, which really does speak to what you were saying. There's a danger there because where it looks like we're all supposed to hold hands for unity, the opposite is happening.
Literally see what's happening in culture. Poverty's gone through the roof. Mm-hmm. You got 3-4 corporations that run all the media. Everything is being centralized, but not centralized in my hand, your hand, not at all centralized in the hands of the marginalized. And at this point, all humans on this plane, except for a very few minority, are marginalized, mm-hmm. right? And it's so genius to divide and conquer how well it's working. Yeah. We, the people, are at each other's throats, but who is pulling the strings? Where is this coming from?
Right.
As a man who has served the gay community his whole life, I sharpened my clinical tools through the whole AIDS crisis, mm-hmm. literally day in, day out. When I see MI6 and CIA project gay pride flag under buildings, as a guy like me who politically is aware, I'm like, something is up with this. Mm. Do these people actually give any fucks about any marginalized group like that? Mm-hmm. And they don't. This is a divide and conquer, and it's all of it. Whether it's Democrat, Republican, like we're all being shafted royally, and everyone's kind of taking and solidifying it. So again, awake, woke. Are we softening? And softening doesn't mean you just lay there and take it. Softening means you actually open your heart. And from that open heart, you actually take social action or not. You can stay in your home. You can raise your child. You can raise your dog. And you can shift the plane. I really do know that in my heart. It's not a belief system. And as someone who's been a do-gooder his whole life and raised by do-gooders, you can run around the world do-gooding from a narcissistic place, and all you're doing is just fortifying that. So it's really important to sit with these things and without reacting, just sit and feel. Does this feel when I am spewing this negativity at someone who is not in agreement with my ego's viewpoint? Is that something that's actually healthy? I can tell you on a soul level, it's absolutely not healthy. It's not a kumbaya, let's hold hands. It's not that. The million, the Taoist thing, right? The one leads to the two to the three to the thousand things. We are living in this highly, highly individuated culture. Never in my own experience has the culture been so individuated. And there's a gift in that. There's a part that we can actually fly our freak flag, really fly our freak flag, just be that. But to your point of staying in the lane, that is not flying the freak flag. That's actually getting into these very specific positions because everyone's living in this terror or everyone wants to project something out as opposed to internalizing it. And the social media movement, which again is another quite dark force, it can be used obviously for good. That's not what I'm seeing. Fortification of the ego is profound. When I'm seeing people, especially in their 20s and 30s, who are really deeply involved with that, there's a real loss of sense of self. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm saying we have to be aware what's happening. We're being so highly manipulated. Never before. You have the brightest minds manipulating these paradigms, and people think there's free will in it. And the sense of self is gone. This thing that we do, look what I'm eating, look what I'm looking, look what I'm wearing, right? That is not, it's like, hey, I love wearing this black shirt. As opposed to, I got to wear this black shirt because maybe Rachel will think I'm really awesome.
Right. Like virtue signaling.
I love that. So the virtue signaling, we can go off on that for hours. But
That's true.
But what is it saying? It's virtue signaling is I don't have a sense of self.
Yes.
So now I need to get a sense of myself by getting you to like me.
Yes.
But since you don't have a sense of self, so neither one of us has a sense of self. So who's pulling the strings? This is not a political issue. This is a spiritual issue.
Right. So, but that's what happens is then they lean into the faction, the politically correct faction, to discover how should I behave in this situation? What should I wear? What should I say? What should I post?
Yes.
And anyone who doesn't agree with that, wrong.
It's wrong. So yes, but then if we take it spiritually, what's happening here? There's no sense of self. And when I say self, I mean capital S.
Yes.
There's a huge sense of false self, small s, which is the ego on steroids, right? And literally the darkness that has descended here is that. You look at this Restrict Act that's coming out. People think it's a TikTok ban. I mean, you want to know about division, read about that. That makes Patriot Act look like a 2-year-old. You know what I mean? The level of fascism that has descended on us. So this divide and conquer is also being used to keep people sleepwalking as these highly fascist mechanisms are put into place. And everyone's so busy arguing about the color of their shirt that they're sleepwalking into fascism. I wouldn't even say they're sleepwalking into fascism. They're fully, deeply in the bed of fascism with the covers pulled over their head, with 3 Xanaxes, 2 more sleeping pills, and God knows what else.
Right.
So, like, let's start for our uplifting conversation. Would you like me to bum you out some more?
Please, more. We want more. And by the way, just so that listeners are aware, when they know what the capital S self is, because that's what this podcast is about, is bringing that into who we are. So thank you for clarifying that. You've said in the past, binary camps are the mark of an addict.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could, because this is what we're talking about. So yeah.
Well, that's great. Thanks for reminding me of that. So addicts, which this culture is a culture of addiction, right? So people don't realize it's not just a heroin addict. Who's an addict? Addict is someone who is in so much pain. Like you cannot live in this culture and not be in pain.
Right.
People are like, well, I'm not a heroin addict. I'm not a coke addict. I'm not an alcoholic. Yeah. How many hours are on your favorite site? How many hours are you distracting yourself?
Right.
So black and white, not in terms of race, but black and white in terms of right and wrong, is the mark of an addict, because the addict is rigid. Rigidity and addiction are the same things. I'm in so much pain, I have to become a control freak, right? So the whole idea, the Freudian anal term, right? Like the idea someone's anal. We are control freaks. When you look at these medications, I'm not saying ADHD is not real. Of course it is. But the foods we're eating and all those things affect these things. But when Adderall is given out like M&Ms, right? There's a shortage of Adderall now, so people are freaking out. What is that? That speedy feeling is because I cannot tolerate the moment. But that speedy feeling is what we're doing all day long. From the second we wake up, we're mobilized. We're mobilized with stimulants. We're mobilized with, look at the lines around Starbucks or any of those, coffee joints 3 times a day, 4 times a day. What is that? Why are we burning our adrenals? It is so difficult. We have become so estranged from ourselves that we have to constantly stimulate the nervous system, because the stranger that's ourself, the capital S, is such a stranger that we're frightened of it. So going back to your point of what is rigidity, rigidity of an addict, this culture is a culture of addiction. The whole woke movement is addiction, right? It's not a softening, it's a hardening. Now, the culture is hyper-individuated. How do we live in this hyper-individuated world with an open heart? That's quite a task, and it can be quite painful. So when one does that, that means a lot of falling away. That means friends fall away. That means clubs you hung out with fall away. But only time we can answer that call, and I really do feel that spirit is knocking hard on our doors. The SWAT team is actually at the door, is breaching you, but we're still not listening. We're like, la, 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 la,
right, right. I have my causes. I'm good about what I'm doing, and I feel good about myself because I believe in X, Y, or Z cause. I hear what you're saying, and I will want to talk about that part, the hyper individualized society, and the difference between self and self work, and those are different things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Again,
so we're looking. Yeah.
Just to reiterate this, small self, SELF with a small S, right? That's the ego. That's Abdi. That's Rachel. Capital S self is Abdi with enough of an ego, Rachel with enough of an ego to function in the world, but not be always reactive. The reactiveness is fear.
Right.
Fear is the illusion of separation, having been fortified by a culture that constantly feeds it. Right. So again, softening, hardening. That's the way that I look at it. Woke, awake. Am I softening every day? Am I softening? Rachel can say something to me. Am I going into this mode? Am I just sitting back being like, okay, that's her viewpoint. Agree, disagree, and then take it from there. The softening piece is really, and I see it in spiritual communities, forget about politics, is easy to see, but even in spiritual communities, I am right, you're wrong. That's the ego talking.
Right.
We both have points of view. That's spirit talking. Here's Rachel having Rachel's experience, Abdi having Abdi's experience. You don't need to shove it down my throat. I don't need to shove it down my throat. The shoving down that's happening with this whole woke thing is actually the small self. And that's the hardening, and that's the pain. And that's literally the illusion of separation being fortified.
Hi, it's Rachel here. If you'd like to dive deeper into your own self-development, but you're looking for an alternative to traditional talk therapy, I think you'll love the Foundation of Self Immersion program. For a full year, you'll get dynamic coursework you can complete on your own time, plus weekly coaching calls and monthly one-on-one sessions with me for personal support. Visit foundationofself.com and click on the events page for more information. That's foundationofself.com. Now, back to the episode. Yes, and so that answers the why is this happening, but I want to take it a step further. The why so the way that because I've sat with this a long time. These little factions that the little safe pockets that are developing, with the right ideology with me, that's the ego. Yes. Of course, on the capital S self level, on the spiritual level, on the cosmic level, we are already connected.
Yes.
So when we talk about why is all this happening in the first place, it's wounding and the lack of shadow work.
Yes.
And the absolute aversion to going into the disowned parts of us and bringing them into the light.
Sure.
It reminds me of how, we talk a lot about stress in our work and cortisol levels and, causing inflammation and illness, but we forget that cortisol levels, when they first are issued from the adrenals, that it actually helps reduce inflammation and helps so the idea, this is kind of what you were speaking about earlier, the impetus behind all of the wokeness is a positive thing. We want social justice. We want goodness to happen, but we flooded the system with this ego stuff. And now it's eating us up. So the question becomes, how long do we stay in this wounded place? Or is there a way out of this wounded place for humanity?
Well, that's a big question.
I know it is.
No, but that's
and
really
here
important.
You go.
Yeah, here you go. So Nisargadatta Maharaj had this wonderful line, which I always took to heart as a healer. First, be out of a need of help yourself before you help others. First, be out of a need of help yourself before you help others. Now,
beautiful.
That doesn't mean that I spend 61 years healing and then I go out. My enlightenment is intertwined with those that I serve. So we do that softening while we're working. Now, going back to the cortisol thing, that's very interesting, right? The fight or flight system, which is part of that, that was designed millions of years ago. Lion jumps out, breathing gets shallow, muscles get tight, adrenals through the roof. Fight or flight, this lion, this beast, and then you have a lot of downtime. That would get kicked in a couple of times a day. Because we become so hypercerebral, that system is on all the time. So one of the things is about the intention. You can do the same job you do, which I know is very arduous. I can do the same job I do, is arduous, be like this all day. Or I can actually drop into my body and do the same thing. So that's something that we have to teach ourselves. So before we go further, just with your viewers or just with me and you, just drop the breathing down and feel your feet. Just bring the awareness into the feet. Kinesthetically bring, exactly. See how your eyes soften. The awareness comes into the body. So as we go forward with this, I always practice this in my own life, and I always share it with people that I work with. Be embodied. This thing, this noggin, is 200 years old. This body is 2 million years old. Which one are you going to trust more? It's not about walking around like a zombie, but if I'm embodied and feeling my body, I'm seeing you, I'm feeling everything in my body, I'm feeling my heart open, I can feel a bit of anxiety, I can feel a bit of grief, but I'm present to it. Being present to it is not running me.
Right.
I'm sitting with it. What's happened now with this rigidity you're talking about, we go into this cortisol moment, we never shut it down. I mean, the level of insomnia that I've been treating, that I see, that I suffer from, that we see all of us, is because we're in this anxiety mode all the time. Anything that comes from that fight or flight mode will be distorted. So one thing that's really important is not even you can meditate 3 hours and get off your cushion and be in this state. Be in the body. That's one thing I would share going forward, an actual kinesthetic practice that we can do all day long. In terms of what's correct for this body mind to do today, what's not correct. So it's not even the actions that we take, it's the intention behind it. I always say this, you can take the same action with 2 different intentions, have 2 different results. So I don't need to know at 8 in the morning, at 11 o'clock, what my conversation is going to be with Rachel. I sit with my body, I feel, I listen, I'm present to you, and what needs to come through comes through. That is actual practice day in, day out, while making room for the immense damage we all have, for the immense wounding we all have, not dress it up, not get lost in it, right? Not because that can happen, but to sit with the perfection at the same time as this illusion of separation, which feels so real all the time. That's really important.
Yeah. The illusion of separation on a spiritual level and on a human level. Just
on a human level as well. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we think about our separation from source, from the divine, from Godhead. That's the source of all pain.
Sure.
But then when we bring it down into the way we communicate as human beings,
Beautiful.
just clarifying for the listeners.
And it's really important. You asked something. I didn't answer it. So you asked something. Everyone's going home.
Mm.
There's no time on the other side, right? There's no time. We're all going home. So part of where we're at right now is we have to really work on our own salvation. And what's salvation? The best that we can to stay as awake as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not this touchy-feely, let's work patchouli, run around with tie-dye, although that's your thing, right? Awesome. Go for it.
Yeah.
But the part is, I'm seeing in my own life what's happened is I've had to really step away from certain people, from certain activities, from certain substances, from certain foods, because it does affect the psyche. Once the psyche and the soul are bound, you can eat rocks and be okay with it. But that takes quite a bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what you're asking, where is this going? That's really up to people on a soul level. On a soul level, I'm fully aware that majority of souls want to experience the separation even deeper. The alarm clock's been going off for a while. We all, when we incarnate, we set these alarm clocks in our lives to wake up, to pay attention. These are what synchronicities are. Question is, how awake are we to it? The more aware we are of it, the more spontaneously they happen more often, and the road will get very clearly lit.
Mm-hmm.
More unconscious we become, these little dynamite that look like cigars that we put in our mouth and blow up in our face happen more and more. Mm-hmm. So your question, we can't even, I personally do my best as someone who's dedicated his life to his own awakening my brothers and sisters. But I'm also fully respectful of people's desire to stay asleep and to feel pain and to create pain. Mm-hmm. But also we live in this world, so we also have to make room for the humanity. When someone says something or sets my house on fire because of the way I look, something's happened to me. That's a real thing. So we got to also make room for that.
Yeah.
But also, like, we can have this high level talk, and there's also a level of how does this deal with humanity? And all these things can be used as grist for the mill. They can all be used to either tighten the heart or open the heart. And denial is not just a river in Egypt, as the old saying goes. We cannot be in denial. I see a lot of this in the spiritual community. It's all great.
Right.
And right, and you as an intuitive, me as an intuitive, we can sit with someone like, oh my God, the grief in this person or the rage in this person. Mm-hmm. So again, the work is we do the best to be out of as much need for help ourselves. And then from that place, whether we're just sitting home, whether we're trying to save the world, whether we're a healer, whether we're a banker, whether we're whatever, that permeates this realm. So the most important thing to answer your question is to be in a place of centeredness. I wouldn't even say peace. Peace is a fragrance of the flower of centeredness. And centeredness is not some hoity-toity thing. Centeredness is, again, me and you feeling our body as we're communicating. I'm aware of my feet. I'm aware of my hands. That opens my heart center some more. Mm-hmm. That opens my throat some more. Right. Opens my third eye some more. Opens my crown chakra some more. I'm not opening my crown. I'm not opening my heart. I'm embodying myself, sitting with what is. So a very interesting thing, we always tell people, try to relax. Oh, the world's falling apart. Try to relax. Mm-hmm. Trying to relax is an oxymoron. Feel your body. Relaxation is a byproduct. Each single person at this juncture in history has been programmed to do something. Mine might not be to save the climate issue. Mine might be just to be centered and then work with the people that I work with or tend to my garden, whatever. We get so heady that we lose that internal compass.
Yes.
And one of the reasons this darkness is upon us, the dark serves the light. End of the day, everything serves the light. But it's the pushing, the pain. It's amazing to me as someone who's done this work for so long. The commitment to not feel the peace because it's become so foreign to us, and the comfort with darkness and pain. Yeah. No one can do anything about that but oneself. And for some people, it's got to be a three alarm fire before they wake up. For some people, it's a candle. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not into that. I'm just going to go into this. Mm-hmm. So it's very important at this juncture to personally take responsibility and to heal the woundings. And the woundings, certain native tribes talk about it goes 7 generations back. Some of the shamanic tribes I trained with, the Peruvian shamans say it goes 9 generations back. In my experience, sometimes older than that. Those of us who've come here, who are listening to this podcast, who are like me and doing the work, we really did come here to heal this lineage as a part of our own, not as like, oh, Bodhisattva, I'm here to save the world. My awakening is intertwined with the people that I serve or I work or I've been born into the family. By doing my work, I'm healing that.
Yes.
Many of us are not aware of that. This darkness that we're seeing about is literally lineage after lineage, no one paying attention. And it gets passed on. We do carry it. These things that come in. So that's a little bit of a side note. Back to you.
Yeah, no, that helps a lot because, and I wanted to sort of weave into this, when you were talking about, there's the spirit level and then there's the humanity level. Mm-hmm. On a practical note, right? So what are we called to do? If we're called to do racial justice or LGBTQ plus rights or climate or whatever it is. But how do we bring that? I mean, obviously we want to stay embodied. We want to, so that we're not getting activated by someone with a differing opinion than ours, which is hard to do. But within the work that we're doing socially, for those of us who are doing any social work, how to stay embodied when confronted with something that is the diametric opposite of what you believe in. I see and this is where I see the split happen, right? Because we can preach to the choir all day long, right? Our little groups of people who agree with us, but as soon as someone disagrees, it gets nasty. So I very recently was canceled by a socially conscious group because of a funny post that I put up on Instagram that was, in my opinion, not a bad thing at all. But someone got offended and I got canceled. And I remember being very upset by it because I wasn't able to help them understand my position, right? So I didn't get angry so much as I got very sad about it. Whereas other people get infuriated, and that actually came back at me, like, this whole, it's not your place to make these kinds of jokes, or it's not your, stay in your lane kind of stuff. This is all coming from wounding and shadow stuff. I get it. And intergenerational trauma, and I get that. So for the listeners, if they are in a situation where they are speaking their truth and they are getting confronted by people who are allegedly on their team, what to do?
It's a really important question. So first of all, we have to really realize how frightening it is. So when you look at comedians, to me, comedians are the master healers, right? They're
holy people.
They're holy people. They bring the unconscious into the conscious. When comedians are telling us, people who've been at their craft 30, 40 years, that they're frightened because they can't say certain things.
Yeah.
That's telling you that shadow suppression is in full effect. So we have to really understand this is way deeper than like someone can agree with you or whatever. This is about people suppressing aspects of themselves that they don't like, projecting it on somebody else and then suppressing it. Now, yes, there's certain levels of things that are super racist. So we're not talking about that. What I'm saying is very, very simple things. So the whole team thing doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. And I stopped preaching a long time ago. We have to really be aware. Majority of people want to stay asleep. That kind of behavior is about, I am so gung-ho about staying asleep that I'm not going to do anything to wake up. And then I'm going to shove it down your throat because what you're saying threatens me. So we have to be aware of that.
Right.
The work becomes internal. Now we have to make room for our humanity. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? We have to make room for the feeling that comes up. It's not a good feeling. When someone's saying to you, and this is like the irony of the whole thing, hey, Abdi, what you're saying is wrong. I'm like, yeah, but then what you're saying is right. What the fuck is that about? Right? People don't actually see the painful comedy of that.
Right.
So we have to make room for the fact that it hurts. We have to make room for the fact that we're actually living through very deep fascism. And this is the fascism of the soul. This is soul suppression. This is beyond Your color can't say something to my color because I'm a little bit darker than you. This color can't say anything to this color because of, like that stuff.
Right. To stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane, but it's your soul has to die because it makes my ego uncomfortable. Your soul needs to die because my ego needs to feel comfortable. This is like the most profound narcissism. And again, I've never seen anything like it. It's very interesting working with younger people in their 20s and their 30s. The level of lack of internal compass, not that my generation at 60s had it, but a 60-year-old has it, but there was a different energy. And I see the sexual indiscretion I see all the time, for example. Again, I'm not a Luddite, but when I see people about to I'm just going through this all the time. I love you. And then both these people are like sleeping with 6 different people. Forget about the fact that when you do that, energy of every person you have sexual intercourse with goes into your system.
Yeah.
It's considered normal. And then the narcissism is like denial. I didn't do it. It didn't mean anything. That's just a little imprint of what's happening on a very, very deep level. So again, we have to make room for humanity. The thing that happened to you, that's insane. Right?
They don't know my history. I was marching on the street for, South African apartheid, anti-apartheid.
I've known you a long time. I mean, your heart is.
They don't know who I am.
And that cartoon that you actually showed me right before our session is hilarious. I thought it was really funny. I thought it was really lovely. I thought it made light of everything. There was nothing racist, sexist, anything about it. That just shows the level of misery that soul that said that to you was living in to vomit that kind of venom. Now, we're living in that world. So a part of it is like, we got to make room for the human. That is painful. For me, as someone who's known you for a long time, who knows who you are, that hurt my heart. I can't even imagine how much it hurt you to have that thrown at you. So part of it is you got to make room for that. But then the other step is, so that's not your tribe. That's not your group. One of the reasons we don't want to wake up, one of the reasons it's so easy to be woke as to awake, is that there is an isolation that happens, right? And I always quote this. Gabriel Marquez, the author, used to say, the place of a sane person in an insane culture is in an insane asylum. That's just like a thing you hear, but like you realize all the people who've actually done internal work have been isolated.
Right.
What's interesting about this time is, as householders, to use a Indian term, it's never been this that was as householders, someone who has kids, who has animals, who has a boyfriend, girlfriend, who has a job, is actually doing deep spiritual work. This is new on the evolutionary scene, and we are forging our way through it. So part of it is like, it's painful. It's painful stuff. And then we have to choose. There are times where we speak our truth. There's times we don't speak our truth.
Yeah.
I give zero fucks about being canceled, because I have realized I was trying to share my truth. I had an Instagram thing for a while, tried it a couple of years ago. And I just realized before things came this way, psychically, I saw it was coming. I just pulled out of it. That was my way. I'm not saying that should be somebody else's way. I was like, this doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I was seeing these algorithms becoming manipulated. I was seeing this stuff happen. It's like 4 or 5 years ago. I was like, I'm going to step away from that. That was my way. Somebody else might want to stay in it and just doesn't care. I am too soft-hearted. Meanness affects me very much. So I have to be protective of my heart.
Yeah.
I'm also not hiding. I still speak my truth. I do it my way. I put on my platform.
Yeah.
My intention is, my prayer is, the people that need to find this, that can be helpful, they'll find it. So it's also very important for those of us who are in the platforms that we are, that we really don't get stuck on preaching, trying to say, that's just our shit. I will live my truth. The way I go to the supermarket affects the way I treat my patients.
Absolutely.
Right? So we take it down to this place now, while making room for humanity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If someone, which happens to me very much, a guy who looks like me, lives in the community that I do upstate New York, gets these sort of racist overtones with people. I don't have a thick skin. I've also learned how not to personalize it. But I'm also 61. At 20, I was in fistfights all the time when somebody would say something like that.
Yeah.
So we have to really make room for the humanity while we do these other things.
Right.
We have to really be aware of that. So we have to really be conscious of not being too hoity-toity about it. But it's painful. It's our dark times. We do have to self-protect the little boy, little girl inside of us.
Yeah.
Especially for those of us. And again, I talk to people all day long from all around the world. The people are having in mind in your experience, they are withdrawing from certain toxic people And toxic, what am I meaning by toxic? It's not a judgment, it's an observation. It's someone who has no connection with their self, capital S, is fully lost in their small self, is being fed all this information by social media and vomiting it out.
Right.
We have to protect ourselves.
Right.
There is a level of protection that comes, and there's a thinning that happens with the awakening. And this is something that hasn't really been taught to us as far as I've seen as someone been around the spiritual community for a long time. So we have to self-protect. But if you have a tender heart, which most people that are listening to us, I'm sure do, it's painful to be here. And not painful because like, oh, it's painful because people are so in their head, they're not in the heart. And if we're heart people, man, it's painful. And the narcissism, the ego, 40 years I've done this work. I thought 5 years ago, man, it can't get worse than this. Holy shit. Just in the mind.
Yeah.
And I can tell you psychically what's coming down, not as a way of going to fear. The level of separation is going to get even deeper, right? People are fully unconsciously handing over everything they own on a soul level for peanuts and walking straight into the prison of slavery, of soul slavery. That stuff's real. Now, again, reminder, dark serves the light. This is an amazing opportunity. The amount of self-growth I'm seeing in people that they're doing in months would have taken somebody 10, 20 years ago, years. So that's the gift of it. That's the mitzvah. That's the gift of what can happen. Conversely, the level of unconsciousness and falling from grace that can happen if we're not awake to this is very profound. Now, as an addict, I can tell you, the bottom that people have, man, it is. If you think it's 10,000 feet, it can be 100,000 feet. With that, either we stay present and not be reactive to it, or we are centered and are not to save people. We just hold this energy the best we can. Yeah. And again, there will be a thinning. Anybody who's listening to this that's going through this has to be aware of it. The thinning is not because you're a freak. It's not because you're depressed. It's not because you're lonely. There is a thinning that happens. Right. But it's just like when you get healthy. You cannot eat 99% of the food when you walk in a supermarket.
Right.
That's a bummer. You got to work harder. You got to plan. You got to cook your food. You have your one restaurant or two you can go to. It's the same with the company we keep, but it's also the same with what we intake. What goes through here is almost minuscule compared to what goes through here these days.
Oh,
through the year.
Absolutely.
So we have to also be aware of that, of what's being fed to us, which is the poison of separation. Media serves the poison of separation. Now, media are using a media to serve the aroma of oneness.
Right.
But that has to be really considered. That's something I do. Like, is this something that's going to bring me unity or separation? Now, as a guy who loves the shadow, I really enjoy watching my dark movies or listen to dark podcasts, but I'm conscious of what's happening. And it's a conscious energy of sitting with that. I'm not a patchouli wearing guy. I really do and have navigated dark waters my whole life, but I'm doing it consciously and more consciously at 61 than I did at 20. And what is the alarm that goes off? If I'm agitated, if I'm angry, if I'm in a sort of me and you, I and thou, I have to be conscious. I got to pull back.
Right.
The times when I'm actually very centered and times when I'm actually, then that's okay. So again, the internal compass has to really be paid attention to.
Yeah.
And it's the feelings. The feelings will always tell you. The mind is totally unconscious. It can tolerate so much discomfort without knowing.
Right. And our body, I mean, our first brain is in our gut, evolutionarily speaking. 100%. So that's the one that we listen to first. And it's the one that influences what the mind thinks.
Yeah. We need to listen to it first. I wouldn't say we listen to it. It's something that we have to learn to listen to, right? So they say neuropeptides in your gut that then we have in the brain. So it's beautiful for you or for me. It's become a habit. But I would again invite people to pay attention. What am I feeling?
Yes.
Now, when I'm watching this Instagram feed, and again, you got the brightest minds of this world designing these things to be highly addictive. One has to really see it the same way one would see food. Right. You would not eat M&Ms all day because it would just crash. You would get, diabetes, blah, blah, blah. It's no different with the social media. And now when you're seeing 70-year-olds be on it as much as like 10 years ago when a 20-year-old would be on it, This stuff is on steroids. So we have to be very conscious what we let in.
Yeah. Yes, very, very much so. And I love the grocery store analogy is, there's going to be stuff around you that's just, is not for you. And I think it's also very important. This is something I talk about in my practice. So I wanted to throw it in here too, for listeners who are used to me talking this way. When we talk about the ego isn't bad. What we're talking about is the difference between a developed ego and an underdeveloped ego.
Yes.
Right. So the underdeveloped ego is the grasping ego, and the developed ego is the container for the spirit.
Yes.
That allows us to not become the perpetually free floating, everything is light and good and bullshit.
Well, you want to have skin, right? The ego, I see that skin. You want to have skin that keeps the juice in, but you don't want to have calluses.
Right.
The callus is the fortified ego. And when you have calluses, you can't feel things. You lose sensitivity, right? So what's happening now culturally, there's about a 3-inch callus. The ego has become this super fortified thing where we don't feel anything, we inside and outside. So it's about a softening of that.
Yes.
The ego is melted and you can't function in a world. So when we say ego, again, to sort of keep on your topic, yes, the healthy ego it's thick enough that you're not at Bellevue Hospital getting locked up, but thin enough that you can actually function in the world. But some of us have a thinner wall, then again, it becomes more protective. You have to be more protective of yourself, what you take in, what you're around.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That would be another way of looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. That actually is a great transition into what we started to talk about earlier, but I want to really bring this in because it's so important. Where is the place for the capital S self, the individual self, the holy self, especially when one is not buying into the bullshit and wants to live awake, right? So we know now the difference between woke and awake, how to live awake in a woke culture. Do we have a chance? What's the end game? Or do we just give ourselves over to the patriarchal cyborg overlord? Or
you don't have a choice. So that's a beautiful question. We don't have a choice. Once you get on this path, it's like a magnet that's pulling you towards it.
Good. Okay.
Once the awakening happens, which again, if people are listening to this podcast, we don't have a choice. Now, the thing that has to be remembered is literally one has to stay in a moment, because once the heart starts opening, literally moment to moment, you get shown what to be done. With the whole woke way of being in the ego, you're thinking 6 years ahead. The awake thing is I wake up today. And then the next thing is like, this morning you can't eat breakfast. Your body's telling you this. Oh, it's not like every day I have breakfast. The next thing is like, you can't pick up the phone and talk to this person, even though they call to reach out to you because today you're in the soft state. So part of it is to really moment to moment be open. You have to tolerate the anxiety. We're all control freaks. We want to know 6 years ahead. We don't have a choice. The patriarch, for those of us who serve the Divine Mother, who are really being awoke by the Divine Feminine in our language, there's no choice. There's no going back. If you go back, it becomes even more painful. But again, the part that has to remember, there's a tremendous amount of dying. It's the dying of the false. It's like me taking my shirt off. But if I'm thinking I'm this shirt for 61 years, it's going to be a little bit of a mental thing. So that's where the surrender piece comes. That's where sitting with self. That's where asking, prayer, for lack of a better word. Literally like, show me. I don't know. What do I do? Does this person stay in my life? Show me. I need to be shown. That's the part I want to work with.
Right. And that takes us out of the head, of the mind.
Yes. And the mind is the forward, right? It's past or future. The mind is past and future, how it functions. The body is moment. When I'm sitting here, I'm in the moment. When I'm feeling my feet, I'm in the moment. I'm not like, yesterday I felt my feet. 2 minutes ago, I'm feeling my feet now. So another way of nicely distinguishing it is, if you're constantly future past, that's your mind running the show. If you're embodied in the moment now, it's very difficult in this culture to stay in that, but that's the practice. And it's like that old Zen saying, if you have time, sit an hour a day. If you don't have time, sit 3 hours. Right? It's like, it sounds like but it really is that. It's like the moments when I'm in this mode, I really have trained myself, like, sit. The shopping can wait.
Yeah.
Now that you're anxious because you're trying to run away from saying, even if you sit 1 minute with that, something opens up.
Right.
With that,
I've done 30 seconds with patients and they're like, oh yeah.
Oh, literally. It's that quick. And that's the gift of this time. We can go backwards really quickly, but boy, we can really go forwards, for lack of a better word, really quickly. And again, what is the tool? Is awareness. What is the awareness? Awareness of the body is the easiest thing I've found. Right? Most meditation practices in this culture is this mantra go. It's all head, head, head. Nothing wrong with them. They can be very useful. The body thing, you can do that while you're driving. You can do that when you're walking. You can do that when you're shopping. You can do that when you're sitting working. So again, staying in the body. But to go back to your question, there's no choice. Once you wake up, the magnet's pulling you. Can we go just, we all know, those of us who read enough and know of the darknesses that are coming, the fascism, 15-minute cities, this Restrict Act. There's a level of crazy that's coming down. But we sign on to be here. That's not something to be afraid of or get like this about it. It's like, I have to trust in this moment. And today I got called to sit with my sister, Rachel, and have this conversation. After this, I'll get called to what needs to happen.
Right.
And that sounds very like airy-fairy. It's not. It's actually the only way that I have found as someone who's sought his whole life of navigating this world. One caveat to this is when you start hearing the truth is no small thing. It's going to tell you things and you're going to have to act on it. And for most of us who've lived unconsciously, a lot has to change. Relationships go, behaviors go, people that we thought we loved go, people that we had predications to go, lovers that we thought was this go, memories of the past go. It really are things have to be released. Either they get released or get clawed out of our hands. Right. It's like, and that part of it is that's a choice. And with time, we'll learn, like, if it's going to go, I'm going to have to let the claw go a little bit. It's going to be more painful. But the dying process is about a birthing. When you're in the midst of it and you're losing things, like, oh my God, it's so painful. But we have to remember there is a joy that's being hidden by these things that are toxic to the capital S self.
Yes. Yes. And I want to take one little little leap farther into it. A lot of people that I speak with, and I know I've spoken to you about this as well, is that feeling of isolation. The more awake we get, the more alone we feel.
Yes.
And of course, there are many of us out there who are feeling alone. And it's not even necessarily that we all need to find each other and build a tribe, because now we're just back to where we started at the beginning of this podcast, where we're just another faction. This really is, self-work is solitary work. Deep self-work is solitary work. People don't like to hear that. Yes. And also, I think it gets conflated with, and this is what we were talking about before, conflated with this idea that you're being an individualist.
Yes.
When in fact it is the opposite.
Beautiful. The
deep self-work that we do is in order to remind ourselves of our connection to all.
Yes.
Because we can't possibly function in a community if we're fucked up, if we haven't done our work.
That's why communities fail. But this is very important.
I realized that was two things, so I'm sorry.
No, it's wonderful what you're saying. I'm with you. So we have to, first of all, really identify or realize that being alone is different than being lonely.
Yes.
Pretty much everyone that I see culturally is lonely amidst a lot of other lonely people. So the aloneness is a part, if you look at all the archetypes of all spiritual practices, it can be 2 days, not likely 10 years, more likely, of that alone part. We're not back to the beginning, because when you actually sit with self, and this is my own experience right now, pretty much everything had to go, but new beings are coming into life. There is a community building that's happening. This is pre-programmed on a soul level into the body mind. We are finding, but it might be one or two people. I have friends, a friend of mine that I see, a man that I love dearly, that's my brother, that I've known I might see him once every 6 weeks, and that'll feed me more than hanging with 100 people like I used to for hours. But there is also a dying. Like, as a person who was an addict, I really can't do heroin anymore. I can't shoot up. It doesn't do anything. It's not even that oh my God, I'm an addict. Like, those things have to be surrendered. Much of the behavior is not to feel the loneliness, which is like doing drugs. We have to learn to tolerate, but also distinguish between being alone and being lonely. right? And once you can tolerate the aloneness, which is relationship with self, first of all, you're so fed when you really do that. But
Right.
it's not about being out living in a desert by yourself, although that might be your path. It will come to you. But the distinguish between the tribe is very different than these groups that we're talking about, which is we started a conversation with the woke thing. That's just a bunch of aspects of the loneliness, being around other lonely people. That is painful stuff.
Yeah.
And once you learn to tolerate your aloneness, you actually cannot tolerate because the loneliness will come back, the uncomfortable feeling when you're around unconscious people.
Yes. Yeah.
Again,
It's like eating really well and then eating crap. You can when I came back from India, I could taste the chlorine in the American bread.
oh,
You know what I mean?
it's so interesting you say that, right? So this is very interesting. This gluten allergies, just as an example. The glyphosate that gets thrown into wheat in America. I have patients that go to Italy. It's probably changing there too now. I know it's changing there too now, but even 5 years ago, they'll eat pasta all day long. That's being alone. They'll come back to the States, have one pasta, and then, their digestion goes haywire. So that's the thing. You will find the non-sprayed people. You'll find each other.
Yes.
This world has that. But again, we can't force that. If you're in a situation where you're feeling alone, dive deep into the aloneness.
Yeah.
Dive deep into it and let it show it. This process has a cooking time. It's like my old martial arts teacher would say, hold this posture for 30 minutes. If you don't hold it for 29 minutes, it's like bringing the water almost to boil and shutting it down. You won't do anything. You got to stand for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Most of us do 5 minutes and we're like, we did it. No, it's going to be starting from over again.
Right.
So we have to let that cooking process, and the cooking process is preordained internally. At some point, surrender. Once that knowingness is heard, it can be unheard.
Right.
And trust me, we'll do our best to unhear it because, oh my God, this is so intense. All I can say from personal experience and observing people, the deliciousness and the aroma of beauty of actually not being lonely with yourself, of not being a foreigner to yourself, of not being foreign to self, worth the price of admission and beyond. We have to tolerate it. We have to tolerate the unease of it. It gets easier, but it's not about being lonely. And I really do believe that the tribes are forming, because that's what I foresee intuitively is we will have these groups. But right now we're still in that deep cooking stage for most of us. And it's coming to completion for some of us. And part of it is like, yeah, you can't eat the food. You can't dig the media. You can't hang with certain groups. That's just part and parcel.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful segue into, final thoughts. What are you seeing coming around? What's not necessarily what's the end game for all this craziness, but what are you seeing coming up for us all?
I'm seeing people waking up. I'm seeing so many relationship breakups, both romantic as well as friendships. I'm seeing people leaving jobs. I'm seeing people really listening. It is and has always been a minority, meaning percentage-wise, of like people that are awake and aren't awake. I'm seeing people drawing into themselves. I'm seeing people find the peace. I'm seeing people tapping into this very deep intuition, like literally waking up from a slumber of 30, 40, 50 years immediately. And I'm also seeing people fully acting the craziest I've ever seen them act, behaving in crazier ways. For some people, they really have to throw a grenade. The soul will throw a grenade into the life in order to wake them up. So I see it getting darker externally. I see people getting crazier, and I'm seeing getting way lighter. Once you become light internally, you actually will be, it's as if living in a different world. That's my experience. That's the experience of people I work with. You actually you're not consuming media 24/7. You're not, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Oh my God, this is right. You're actually living in that peace. So what is the end game? The end game, ultimately, everyone will wake up. There's no time on a soul distance. Question is, how much more do you want to taste this dream?
Right.
I'd like to taste this dream. I don't like to taste a nightmare. I've been unconscious in a nightmare. I'm conscious in a nightmare. Now it's not as much of a nightmare. I still reach out for those who want a helping hand because that feeds me. But I choose to have a nice dream as opposed to a nightmare. Yeah. That's what I see. Yeah. And that's the personal choice moment to moment.
Yeah. And what I love that. And to add to it, and I would love your feedback on this as we close out. It's all there for us, to do. We don't need necessarily to do anything but go inside. There's nothing you have to do except
Ask to be
Ask.
shown, daily ask to be shown. My own intention was like, burn away what doesn't serve me gently. I've learned that and help me remember who I am.
Yeah.
Burn away what does not serve me gently. Help me remember who I am. And I want to feel peace and I want to feel joy. And the joy in this culture has become, we feel these moments of addiction, which is a high, is not joy, is the actual joy. It's so profound. It's always there. We just got to slow down enough because that's our birthright, but that's also our true nature.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that we get done. We allow ourselves to get done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like literally that allowing. So even that becomes intention. Show me. I don't know. What the hell is this guy talking about? What is this getting done? Show me. Bring this process. Soften me. Help me feel ease.
Yeah.
Show me. Give me strength to let go what doesn't serve me.
Yeah.
Give me strength. Give me courage to act what I need to do. And I'm seeing that happen. I mean, I'm really seeing this profound awakening movement in the midst of this profound sleepwalking movement.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that too. I'm glad that you bring that up because I'm seeing more people and faster, right? As you said, it's
incredible.
fast.
Yeah. The grace we're drowning in water and we're asking for water. The grace that's coming down, the grace that we're surrounded with is profound. We just got to tip our cups and hold it. And even that we don't know how to do, we ask. The asking thing is really profound.
Yeah.
We're all such willful motherfuckers that we don't even realize that there's a thing. The giving up, the surrender part, that can be asked to show me. Mm-hmm. That becomes a prayer. Show me. I don't know. Show me. And then to tolerate the unease, because we want to know yesterday. Show me. See, there's a yes, there's a no, there's a I don't know. In this culture, we know yes and no. We haven't been taught or been educated into I don't know is actually a form of knowing till we get shown yes or no.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And yes, being able to sit in uncertainty is absolutely essential. And also, last thing, be gentle with yourself on this process, because I can't tell you how many people, I was talking to my mother and she pissed me off and I clearly failed all the things we've been practicing. It's okay.
So that's a small self.
Yeah.
Very evilly fortifying itself. Yeah. The gentleness is huge, and this is the part where we have to hold. I mean, it's that Japanese term, it's like holding the imperfection. There's a perfection in imperfection. When we're trying to do this perfect thing, man, that's the thing that kills us.
Yeah.
Is to hold the imperfection while we hold the divine mother. That these two things can coexist. We're living in duality. The nature of duality is that. Part of the tasting of things we do is because of the forgetfulness. So beautifully, you said that gentleness is crucial. But without gentleness, more than crucial, the cooking can't happen. Right. We have to have that. This idea, we have to be perfect, this idea. And, ultimately, I haven't met anyone who doesn't feel like a piece of shit on some level, who doesn't feel like they're fake. That's just how it rolls.
Yeah.
Once you kind of sit with it and deal with it, it actually lifts. Mm-hmm. It's not that, I'm perfect. You're just not letting your mind get taken with those things. You pay attention to the things you can do. Like, I might not be able to fix the world today. I can certainly eat better today. I can take a nap today. I can go, so it's that piece. So beautiful that you put that up. The gentleness is actually probably the most important thing we talked about today.
Yeah, it's a process, as you said. Yes, things are happening fast, and that can be disorienting. But it's a process, and don't expect yourself to be fully actualized, or that you can't function. Like you said, I have to be fully enlightened before I can do anything.
No, it goes hand in hand. And also, the soul never gives us more than we can handle. That has to be remembered too. But it can be very painful. I mean, I know your story, my story. We've been through some very painful relationship breakups as sensitive souls that's like almost destroyed us. But what destroyed had to go. But would I go through it again? Fuck no. But was it actually totally necessary for my evolution? Yes. Is it painful? Yes. But I also have to catch myself not to repeat it right into my head. At some point, I got to be like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So we are on railroad tracks once we get on a spiritual path. That is something that one gets to trust as time comes by. And ask, connect. You're asking yourself, your higher self, but ask. I'm not a religious person, but certainly I'm a spiritual person. That communication is important. And again, learn to tolerate the not knowing in the moment. The not knowing will lead to knowing always. Mm-hmm. But again, it's knowing with a small K and knowing with a capital K. We're going to the capital K. And again, this process there are people that are going to have to leave your life. Either they'll leave or they'll blow up or it'll be so painful. But always remember, what you're giving up is making room for what's to come.
I'm going to leave it there. That's a beautiful, beautiful way to end this interview. Abdi, thank you so much.
So lovely catching up with you. I'm really happy doing the work you're doing, and hopefully blessings from the above for everybody who hears this. Make their life easier, make their path more gentle, bring ease and love to their heart. I send you so much love.
Hi, this is Rachel Astarte from the Self-Talk podcast. I'd love for you to send me your emails with questions or stories about yourself. What are you looking for? What are your questions? What are you grappling with in your own personal life that has to do with your identity, with yourself, with your very existence? These are the things that we're going to talk about during the podcast. And go ahead. It's all right. Get deep. I can handle it. So send them to Rachel@selftalkpodcast.com. And I'll see you on the next episode.